Hey guys, we're back with another album review. Yeah, we are still getting closer and closer, and now I'm finally going to talk about one of the 5 albums I had left on my list, and we're going to be talking about it. Tile below, this is the review of the brand new album from death metalers from, I believe, Florida, or no, Arizona, excuse me. The review of Arizona death metalers' Job For A Cowboy, their new album, Sun Eater. Now, before I get into this review, just to let people know who Job For A Cowboy are, if nobody knows. Job For A Cowboy is a death metal band from Arizona, from Glendale, Arizona, that started off as a deathcore band with their EP Doom, which came out in 2005, where the stuff was very metalcore sounding within a death metal way with the brutality behind it, but the song Johnny Davy was doing mostly pig squealing vocals that you would hear mostly in grindcore music. But then once they got signed to Metal Blade, they decided to not follow the deathcore trend and go to straightforward death metal, which I give Job For A Cowboy props because I do not really like deathcore, and the fact that they went from that state to wanting to be straightforward death metal, and they did that with their debut album Genesis, which came out in 2007, and it was the highest charting heavy metal debut album since Slipknot's first album at the time to debut in the above 100 on the Billboard charts. And it debuted on number 54 on Billboard. So for a death metal album, that's pretty big for that kind of thing. They put out their second album, Ruination, in 2009, which I dug the song Unfurling a Darkened Gospel. That song was just absolutely brutal. Then their last record they had, which came out in 2012, called Demonocracy, where they focused a lot on like anti-religion and political evils and stuff. That's always been a thing with Job For A Cowboy. They'll talk about like dark stuff like anti-religion with some political evils in between. But now we get to their new album, Sun Eater. Now, this album is slated to release next week, next Tuesday. But however, I was lucky enough to find a sample for me to check out, and I listened to it. And I just want to say, first of all, wow, riffs beyond goddamn riffs, solos beyond goddamn solos. Okay, now to try to do this as objectively as I can as possible, but this record was a remarkable change for the band, where they decided to not play standard death metal. This band really wants to be an entity of their own in the world of death metal. They want to try to be more unique. And the way they're doing it is now they're playing their style a lot more progressive and technical. To the point where this album is a progressive technical death metal album. Totally different from, this is probably their most diverse album they have ever made. And I might even say it could be their best work, but let's get into it. You kick off the album with the song Eating the Visions of God, the longest track of the album at 6.5 minutes. And there's just so much going on, so much brutality and so much uniqueness and so much atmosphere behind it, where it's like 1 minute it's sounding like the soundtrack to like the apocalypse or something, and it's that way throughout the whole album. There's always that element of like apocalyptic brutality that goes on, but it has a musicianship sensibility with its technical playing and progressive style that they're aiming for. The song Son of Nihility, which I probably just destroyed, but that was the first single they put out from the album, and I thought it was a great track to kickstart everything for this album. This track was amazing. Really, really enjoyed what the band was able to try to do with that track. And then it kept going with the song The Stone Cross, which was the shortest song of the album at a little under 4 minutes. But for that short amount of time, it was just pure brutality and just great playing throughout the whole track. And you have the blast beats in there that really kick-started the whole thing. The Synthetic Sea into Global Shift and the Celestial Antidote. All three of those tracks in that middle portion of the album was just ripping through the riffs and the solos. The drum work on those tracks, really in the whole album, was just unbelievable. And then you go into the song Encircled by Mirrors, into Buried Monuments, and then to the closing track, Warming Nightfall. The two tracks before the closer were very, very brutal technical death metal songs that just really just was all over the place. And it's like this whole thing was like a big roller coaster ride, and then you get into the closing track, Warming Nightfall, where they're incorporating some melodies. Although there is a little bit of an element of melody throughout the whole album within the solos at times. So they're trying to bring that into the mix as well. But the melodies were more prevalent on this track, Warming Nightfall, because also it gets very, very different with how it's being done. Like, it's slower. It's a slower track, where some of the other songs were mid-pace or very, very fast. This was a more slower track, and they were able to show their progressive abilities on this song for this closing 6-minute, 20-second song. Wow. It was just a hell of a way to close such an amazing CD. The production on this album was unbelievable. I mean, Jason Sukoff, the producer, he's always a smart guy when it comes to production. I mean, he did some Trivium albums. He did Deicide's last album. To my remembrance, I believe he did a 6 Feet Under album, I want to say. But, yeah, but he's done Black Dahlia Murder. He's done a lot of stuff for a lot of great bands with production. And this album was no different from how he's been able to do in the past. He's just a hell of a producer. The performance from all band members on all aspects, they all performed very well. Johnny Davey on the vocals, he just went deep, but he would also get into like Glenn Benton style screams. That really was cool. And really with this whole album, with it being a technical progressive death metal album, which is something completely different from any album they've ever done. Like their EP Doom was deathcore, and their last 3 albums / first 3 albums were straightforward, traditional, standard death metal. But with this album, they wanted to go in a completely different direction with their sound. They wanted to explore and add on to what they were able to do in the past with some technical progressive death metal abilities, harken you back to bands such as Death and Atheist and even Suffocation, Opeth, Obscura. Just so many of those bands, that's what they do. But also this album, to me, reminds me a lot of listening to Death with how the musicianship came into play. I mean, with Death, their whole career, I mean, Chuck Schuldiner was always such a genius at picking out great players that can play and make fantastic, fantastic records. Job For A Cowboy is going in that route where they want to try to be as unique and be very unique, but also make their music incredible. To the point where I could personally say this could probably be their best work ever. All this album was a roller coaster ride in terms of how it was able to get into some brutality with some progressive and some melody. But overall, this album was just a monster. I'm not going to say it's a perfect album, but it's as close as it could get. But high praise to this album. High praise. 9.75 out of 10. This album was a mammoth monster. At least in my opinion. I know that you're going to have people out there who have something different to say, but this is all my opinion, and that's what's the beauty of it. It's what I say, and what I say counts for these kind of videos, because it's all coming from within me. But this album blew my mind, to the point where I may actually pick this CD up at some point. But what did you guys think? If you have listened to this album, what did you guys think of Job for a Cowboy, Sun Eater? Let me know in the comments below what you think. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Peace.